Have you ever picked up your phone just to check one quick thing, and then you look up and somehow 45 minutes had just evaporated? Yeah, you're definitely not alone. There's this invisible battle being fought for your attention every single second of every day, and the battlefield, it's that screen you're holding. So how did we even get here? And, more importantly, is there anything we can do about it? Let's get into it. So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll pull back the curtain on the guy who invented one of the internet's most famous features and why he regrets it. Then, we'll zoom out and look at the whole system that's designed to keep us hooked. After that, we'll explore a totally new way to think about self-control and see how it held up in a real-world experiment with, you guessed it, TikTok. We'll dig into the, well, pretty mixed results and wrap things up by asking what this all means for the future of our screens. All right, let's kick things off with a classic story of good intentions gone wrong. We're talking about the person who created what is probably one of the most addictive features in social media history. Just let that sink in for a second. That's a truly mind-blowing number. And you know who calculated that? The inventor himself, Azar Raskin. He actually did the math on how much time his creation, the infinite scroll, was eating up around the world. And that's the number he landed on. Over 1 million human lifetimes wasted every single day. But here's the really wild part. Back in 2006, Azar Raskin wasn't trying to build a digital trap. He was actually trying to do the exact opposite. He just thought clicking the next page button was clunky and annoying. So his goal was to make browsing smoother, to remove the disruption. The huge irony, of course, is that by getting rid of that natural stopping point, he accidentally created one of the most powerful hooks for keeping us glued to our screens. And look, the infinite scroll isn't just some one-off feature. No, it's a key piece of a much, much bigger system, an entire economy that's built on capturing and holding on to our most precious, limited resource, our attention. And just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, right now there are 4.76 billion active social media users on this planet. That is a massive number of people whose attention is basically up for grabs every day. So in this system, the longer you scroll, the longer you stay on the app, the more money they make. It's a really simple equation. More of your engagement means they get more data and you see more ads. Your time literally equals their profit. And well, that's a pretty powerful incentive to design things that are as engaging and, let's be honest, as addictive as possible. And this stuff goes way beyond just willpower. These designs have real biological effects on our brains. Researchers have flagged three big ones. First, things like the infinite scroll are basically slot machines. You pull the lever, or, swipe your thumb, and you get a random reward. That messes with our dopamine system and can build addictive habits. Then there's the whole social validation thing. Chasing likes can create a ton of anxiety and emotional distress. And finally, scrolling late at night, that blue light from our screens actually suppresses melatonin, which is the hormone that tells your body it's time for bed. And that leads to a huge chronic sleep problem for a lot of us. Okay, so if the design is the problem, could design also be the solution? This question has led to a really interesting new approach, one that goes way beyond those screen time warnings that, let's face it, most of us just swipe away. Think about the old way of doing this. You've got these digital self-control tools, or DSCTs. They're like a brick wall. They give you hard blocks, loud alarms, rigid app limits. But we all know how easy it is to just hit ignore for 15 minutes over and over again. Digital nudges are different. They're more like a gentle speed bump. They just add a tiny bit of friction or a moment to pause and think, guiding you without actually taking away your freedom to choose. Right, so the point of a nudge isn't to force you to put your phone down. It's really just to break that automatic muscle memory pattern of behavior. All a nudge does is ask, hey, are you sure this is what you want to be doing right now? It's all about turning an unconscious habit into a conscious choice. Okay, that all sounds great in theory, but does this subtle approach actually work in the real world? Especially on a platform that's, famously designed to be one of the most engaging things on the planet, TikTok. Well, some researchers at Junkie King University wanted to find out. So here was the setup. It was a small study, just 11 participants, all young, active TikTok users. For 1 week, they installed an app called OneSec. And this app was set up to trigger one of two different nudges every single time they tried to open TikTok. So imagine this. You go to open TikTok and before you see a single video, bam, one of these screens pops up. The first nudge was super simple, just an instruction to take a deep breath, a forced pause. The other was a little more active, asking them to set a time limit for how long they planned to be on the app. The goal for both was to interrupt that instant open and scroll reflex. So a week goes by with all these little interruptions. What happened? Well, the results were, let's just say they weren't exactly straightforward. It's a little complicated. This is it, right? The big question. Did these little speed bumps actually make a real difference in how much time people spent on the app? And at first glance, if you just look at the raw numbers, it looks like a huge success. I mean, 10 out of the 11 participants cut down their TikTok time. On average, the drop was 193 minutes for the week. That's a reduction of almost 36%. Seems like a total win, right? Well, hold on. Because in the world of scientific research, looks like a win isn't good enough. Because the study was so small and people's usage varied so much, the result wasn't statistically significant. All that means is that the researchers couldn't say with like 95% confidence that the nudge caused the drop. It could have just been random chance, or maybe something else, like the fact that it was exam season for these students. Okay, but this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. If you stop looking at the spreadsheets and start listening to what the participants said, a totally different picture comes into focus. The real victory here wasn't about the minutes they saved. It was about the change in their mindset. The huge majority of them said they felt more aware of their habits and that it led to positive changes. This quote from one of the participants really just says it all. The nudge transformed their scrolling from a mindless automatic habit into a deliberate intentional action. And you could argue that learning to be intentional with your time is way more valuable than just cutting down a few minutes here and there. Now, of course, it wasn't a perfect system, not at all. Most of the participants said the constant interruptions got pretty annoying after a while. And this is a really key finding. About half of them fell into something called the substitution effect. Basically, when the nudge stopped them from opening TikTok, they just shrugged and opened Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts instead. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway? Let's try to tie all these pieces together and figure out what this means for us and our digital lives going forward. Here's the bottom line. Digital nudges are not a magic bullet. They're not going to magically cure our phone addictions overnight, but they do represent a really important shift in thinking. They're a step toward designing tech that actually respects our choices, that encourages us to be more mindful, and that puts us, the user, back in control. Maybe the goal shouldn't be less screen time, but more intentional screen time. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. We live in a world where most of our technology is built to take our time from us. But what if it wasn't? What if the next big thing in tech wasn't about maximizing engagement, but about maximizing human flourishing? What would our world look like if our apps were actually designed to give us our time and our attention back?